Season 7 of Sun Coaches Podcast is proudly brought to you by Titan Sensor. Season 7. That was my number in high school, so maybe this will be lucky for us. We'll see. You know, I've learned over time that when somebody's talking about something you really don't want to talk about, you just can always throw in there, hey, I knew this guy once, and then just pretty much make up whatever you want to, and they won't listen to it. They'll get off track. And you don't have to talk about the uncomfortable thing anymore. Coach, like we do every week, tell everybody where you grew up and where you're from. Sun Coaches Podcast, where not everybody has a funny story, but everybody has a story. Hope you enjoy Season 7 of Sun Coaches Podcast. Sun Coaches is proud to partner with Titan Sensor for Season 6 and 7. Titan is made in the USA. Proudly founded and based in Texas. When you connect with Titan, you are not alone. You can collaborate and share templates with other coaches across the country to build reports and foster competition. Used by programs such as State 6A Georgia State champion Grayson High School, Titan can tailor a package to fit your needs. The eye in the sky never lies. Improve your team's performance with Titan. Welcome to Sun Coaches Podcast, Season 7. I'm super excited today to be joined by one of the true legends of the game, one of the best guys to lead young men in our profession, the head coach at McIntosh County Academy, MCA, Coach Bradley Warren. Thanks for being on with me.
Hey, man. Glad to be on.
Well, Coach, where did you actually grow up and go to school and all of that?
I grew up in the independent state of Dade in Trenton, Georgia, and played at Northwest Georgia High School, which is now a middle school, and was on an undefeated team there under John McIntosh, who was out of the Darlington program. And then I went and played college ball out of high school at UT Chattanooga under Buddy Nix.
Well, what all did you play in high school? Did you just play football, or did you play a little bit of everything?
Well, I grew up playing baseball and football. My dad was a really high-level baseball player, and so he pushed baseball a little bit, but I migrated to football. I enjoyed it and liked it, and I remember that he got me a set of weights. It was the little thin bar with the plastic cement weights. It had 110 pounds when I was in sixth grade going into seventh that summer, and I started lifting and been doing it ever since, man.
Just fell in love with it doing that.
Yeah.
I remember those cement weights. Those plastic cement weights. We thought we had some. You had a set of those, you were fixing to get ripped.
I remember that I did 100 pounds one time in June. And by September, or August, whenever it was, when school started, I could do the 110 pounds 6 times. And I thought I was a beast.
You probably were back then. Freaking beast. Went and played UT Chatt, so you had to be pretty good. How was that?
I enjoyed it. I probably was a little small, a little slow to be playing there, but I always had a good football mind and made some good friends. And back in that time I played, there was JV football, so at the college level. So I got to play against Tennessee, Greenville, South Carolina, some really good ones. And then in 91, they took only 28 players on a travel team on defense. I played linebacker, and I made the travel team to Alabama. We went and played Alabama in 91. They won the national championship in 92. That was a Gene Stallings team. So that was my first road trip. That was a pretty good one.
Yeah, I imagine that was cool getting to go to. Did y'all play in Tuscaloosa, or did y'all play at?
No, I played only at Legion Field.
Oh man, that's awesome. So, what did you know you were going to coach all along, or did you get in the wrong line, or did you want to?
I didn't, man. I was really struggling with what I wanted to be when I grew up. I was one of those dudes that changed majors a lot. I really, honestly, I'm a true living testament to. I went to college to play football, and I called in the counselor's office at UT Chattanooga by Miss Mary Tinkler, and she said, "Bradley, you've got to declare a major." And I really didn't know what that was, and I was like, "This year, play football." And I was making good grades, so she helped me along, and I ended up coming out of Chattanooga with 2 bachelor's degrees. I had a degree in psychology, adolescent child behavior, and a degree in early American history. So Ended up getting 2. I call those my football degrees.
Well, you got 2 more than a lot of people are able to scrounge up when they're off doing whatever they're doing until they grow up. So did you have any aspirations to coach at that level or GA, or did you just go straight into?
I got hurt in '92, about halfway through the season. I hurt some ribs, and they never really healed right. And back in those days, people didn't tell us so much about concussions. I struck with my head a lot, and my neck was wearing out. So I helped coach, just kind of an unofficial GA. I was part of the team, but I was injured, so I just went out and did whatever the coaches wanted me to do. Ended up looking at film and ended up, doing some of the things that a GA does, and it certainly pushed me into that area. But it was around 1993, not to be exact. My brother, a 2-time state champ in wrestling in Georgia, had been killed in a car wreck. And I was about to go be a federal U.S. Marshal. I was about to go to U.S. Marshal school. I was running a juvenile detention center on the weekends. And this principal called Alan Long. He's a old head coach in the state of Georgia. He was athletic director then. He asked me to come coach a middle school wrestling team because my schedule was open at the time. I had some odd school hours, so I went and coached that middle school wrestling team, and the rest is history. That was the passion that I knew I'd been missing.
So you started out coaching wrestling?
Football and wrestling, but that was my first official gig. I was volunteering. God was trying to make it clear to me, but I really didn't see that I wanted to be a teacher. I knew that I liked the sports, but I didn't know I was going to be a teacher, man. I'd laughed at you my senior year if somebody told me that.
So what school was that?
That was at Northwest Georgia High School in Trenton, Georgia. It was Dade Middle.
So you went back to where you were from?
I did, and then let's see, that winter I had to do a student teaching placement, and so I went into Ridgeland High School, and they did not have a wrestling coach. The guy that had stepped down, Chris Sykes, knew him from being in wrestling, and they asked me to coach the wrestling program. Because I was a student teacher, he let me coach them, and we'd had a really good year that year. We went 3rd in the state. I knew from then on I wanted to be a coach. My first coaching gig, though, was as a community coach with George Hobletzel. He was, Tommy and George coached at Piedmont, Alabama, and he was with Coach Lamb at Calhoun for a long time as his defensive coordinator.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I always tell people when I had Coach Poston on, I told the story about when I was at Temple and we came up there to play Dade, and there was a wreck on 75. We were coming for the baseball game, and I think you were there, and you were the AD, and y'all kept calling like, "Where are you at?" Like, man, there's a wreck, and I'm downtown. I'm like, there's a Chinese restaurant, an adult bookstore, and a gas station, and somebody's like, "I know exactly where you're at." And we had to go up Lookout Mountain to get around. I mean, you were like, just get here when you can, man. We'll do, it was ridiculous. It was crazy. I was like, man, we're having to go. I kept telling the kids, I'm like, hey, guys, we're going to go into Tennessee to come back into Georgia. And they were like, It's like, no, Dade County is like its own universe, dude. And it was so nice. Y'all were so gracious, and the facilities were fantastic. And it was it was a neat place. And I just always thought that was just a cool place right there in Chattanooga. Well, not in Chattanooga, but might as well be.
Yeah, always at home. My parents lived just a little ways from the high school at the foot of Lookout Mountain, so I spent 11 years there as athletic director and head football coach. We pretty much raised our kids there. So yeah, it wouldn't be the first time that I've guided somebody into the independent state of Dade. Off the state, Chattanooga traffic's bad.
Yeah, we had options, and we were able to. I cursed us because when we got to we passed Calhoun, and I was like, man, we're making excellent time. We're going to be there in time to, it's like the first game of the season, and I was like, yeah, we're gonna make great time. Everything was cooking along, and then all of a sudden, a tractor trailer truck had jackknifed on 75 on the other side of the river. I was like, oh my God.
this is my second stint here in Darien and McIntosh. My first stint, I was also the wrestling coach and hadn't quite made the athletic director's position at that time. So I was football coach and head football coach. And then I kept coaching wrestling for a long time. But my mom is a retired cafeteria manager. So we would come up to Calhoun and Adairsville for the state tournaments around that area. And on the Saturday or Sunday morning, whatever it was, we woke up from the hotel. The wrestlers were starving from making weight. She would make them an all-you-could-eat breakfast at her house. So we would drive up over Lookout Mountain to stay out of the Chattanooga traffic. I didn't think about some of the kids down here not seeing, where the hang gliders jump off the bluff, for example. And we passed the bluff and was headed to their house. And I looked, and half my team was laying in the floorboard of the school bus, scared to death. Oh, Lord, help me, Jesus, that kind of deal.
Yes.
All right, I got to explain this to them. So they got all right in a little while.
So you started when you were at the middle school. How long were you there at Northwest and Ridgeland before you got your next move up or the next thing you did?
So I was really patchworking that second degree together I told you about. I needed, something to teach. So I wanted to teach history. And I know that sounds weird. Everything back in those days was weightlifting before or after school in what I did. So I wanted to teach history, and I had to do some student observation hours, some student teaching hours. So after that 1995 year, I tried to go work around the area, and I really didn't have anything that I wanted. So I sent some resumes out, and I had several opportunities to go coach. And a buddy of mine told me, he said, Bradley, go coach somewhere where they're terrible, where the football program is just awful. The bad news bears of football. And he said, fix it, and then you can go get whatever job that you want. And I thought, that sounds pretty good. The fixing part was a little more difficult than I anticipated. But I interviewed with Steve Patterson, who was the defensive coordinator for Dan Pitts. And so Steve, I was his first hire. I was his middle linebacker coach, inside linebackers coach. He ran a 5-2 under defense called Stack. And then he was a big option guy. So I'd come out of a wing T system and a split back veer system in college. So when I came down, I loved it. It was a completely different culture. Kids wanted to learn how to play ball. And so I learned a lot about football, being a football coach, not what I had preconceived ideas of as a player. Of course, that molds you some. I learned a lot from Steve Patterson. He was really ahead of his game in the defensive side of the ball and in the weight room at the time.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to interview with him when he was at Monticello, and I was just getting started. And he was just like the cool, just real laid back, real sharp, real detail oriented, and seemed like a really good person. And I was like, man, that's exactly who I need to start with.
He's a good dude. We still talk every now and then. I'm a big front guy, stop the run, pressure the passer. That's kind of my strength on defense. And I've always hired a secondary coach, and he was secondary, so I bounce ideas off him occasionally. I had something the other day I was struggling with a little bit, and got his 2 cents worth.
So how long were you with him?
I was with Steve 96, 97, and 98. And I was going with him to Monticello was my plan. And I think that he was going to give me the defensive side of the ball. I was going to coordinate for him. And Dub Huff, the quarterback at Georgia, was going to be his offensive coordinator. He was down here. He and I were roommates till he found a place. So I was also the wrestling coach, and our wrestling program had gotten really good at that time. And I went to the principal's office, Dr. David Franks, and I'll give you the short. I was going with Steve, and he said, well, we don't want you to go. You're doing really good with wrestling. What will it take to keep you here? And I was just kind of kidding. I said, I want to be the head football coach. I was half serious, too, now. Don't get me wrong about that. And he looks at me and says, okay. And that's how I got to be a head football coach. I called my dad. My dad's pretty sports minded. And I said, Dad, I'm going to be a head football coach. He said, well, that's good, son. What are you going to run? I thought, well, I know how to run cover 3, and that's the only coverage I knew. I knew how to run the 5-2 under from Steve. And I knew about 4 plays out of the wing tee and 1 pass. So that's what we started with.
Hey, simplicity.
It was so simple. It was crazy. We went that first year that I was head coach in '99. We went to playoffs, and the place went crazy. And I had about everybody back except for a couple of really good couple of players. We went to the Dome that next year and got beat by Buford in the semifinals. Had beaten a really good Athens Academy team in the quarters. And I was telling some of my younger coaches this not that long ago. I said, guys, you're not going to believe this, but we ran isolation, counter isolation, sweep, and waggle. That was the whole season. That was the plays we ran. We didn't run anything. That was it. And mixed a little jet sweep in with it.
And got really good at it. I remember y'all's runs y'all had back then because I first got started. And tell some of these young coaches now, like, yeah, he was like the first guy to ever win at MCA, and then went back home, and then now he's back down there. Like he's one of the only people ever to win down there because it's such a unique situation down there.
It is. It's a unique situation. Every place you go, you're going to like the kids. Kids are kids. So some advice I tell some of those guys, don't be afraid to move if you're trying to build your career. Kids are going to be kids. You're going to like them. But I think the thing that separates this position down here from a lot of others, the kids here value your time and like your time that you spend with them. And as a coach, man, that's all you got to give, so it's been a good fit for me in that regard. I've had, building. I'm a builder. I've not ever inherited one of the Silver Spoon programs that are always winning. I've always tried to build my race car, so to speak, and go challenge those guys. And McIntosh was a challenge, and in some ways, we're still building. It's easier to build a team, Chris, than it is to build a culture, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I agree with that 1,000%. So you were down there, and y'all made the playoffs first year. You go to the Dome second year. You're probably like, man, ain't no to this.
Yeah,
we only ran 4 plays. I mean, crap. Why y'all making it so hard?
Yeah, we were. I remember Mike Muschamp at Savannah Country Day before he went to Lovett. He told me we'd just beaten them, and they were really good. And he said, man, that's the simplest offense I've ever seen, but your kids are good at it. I was like, I don't know if I should take that as a compliment or an insult.
Well, winning cures all. And you're down there from the mountains. I mean, really, it's got to be as huge. I mean, it's just a completely different culture than what you're used to.
Yeah, so it's a different culture. The culture here is, it's a fishing community. It's a poor community in a lot of ways, but rich in time and effort. It was a completely different culture. And I found out early in my career that the kids liked the time, liked me being in the community. So as I, kind of meandered around the state from McIntosh to Central Gwinnett to Gilmer to Dade, you kind of reflect on where you want to spend your latter time. And I enjoy the little town where I can go fish and not have a red light and go to B&J's restaurant and eat fresh shrimp. I kind of enjoy that these days.
So down on the coast, is it true, because it's always been the rumor, that you have a group of kids that have to catch a ferry to get to where they live?
That is true. Sapelo Island is there's no automobile access. It has a ferry that runs, and occasionally, it's not all the time, but occasionally you will have a kid play football for you that lives there, and you've got to make some special arrangements from time to time for that kid to get to practice, get to a game, to get on the ferry home. But they've gotten better since I was here the first time. They have, they got aunts or uncles or somebody that lives in town, and they'll stay with them when they need to. But heck, I found a kicker out there. My first stint here, saw this kid kicking a football on the beach barefooted, and he ended up playing for me, and he kicked for me. He kicked barefooted, and ended up playing fullback. I think we got a shoe on him after he started playing fullback. But that was a kid his name was Quentin Wilson, and he just happens to be a brother to Alan Bailey, the NFL player. So he was a good one too. Nobody heard his name, but he was a really good ball player for us.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how long were you at McIntosh the first time?
I was there 6 years, 3 as an assistant coach and 3 as the head coach.
And
so when we got, what's that?
Go ahead.
When we got in 2000, we got beat by Buford, and then in 01 had an all new team, and we went 6-4. And there were some people kind of hurt my feelings about it. They were, not being very nice. I wasn't very thick skinned as a young coach, and we ended up going 8-5 and get beaten in the quarters by Dwight Hotstutler up at Bowden. And I thought, you know what? I don't have to be treated like this by a few individuals. Little did I know every coach has those kind of people. And I went to Central Gwinnett to just see what big football was like around Buford, and Cecil Flo and Dave Hunter and T. McFerrin at South. I just wanted to, Dexter Wood at Buford. I just wanted to coach in the area with those guys. And man, those first 2 years, Chris, it was a learning curve.
Yeah, I would imagine going from the island or down by the island on the coast and going to Metro and not being at a perennial power was probably eye-opening, to say the least.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal. I came in, we were rolling off a 27-11 record in 3 years, and had a Final Four and a Elite Eight trip. And I went into Gwinnett in my first year. Lo and behold, we were 2-8, and that'll humble you really quick. And the second year, I was able to get some coaches in and start headed in the right direction. That was 03. We went 4-6. And I got together with the main members of the staff, and I said, guys, we've got to do something different than Gwinnett's ever seen. We just don't have the big lineman, Brandon Pilgrim, and I forget the guys. They had 2 linemen at Parkview one year that both went D1. One went to Georgia. Zed McKenzie was other kids' names, and Jeff Rancourt. There were just people. Rennie Curran at Brookwood. We've got to do something to compete with them. So I had seen Jeff Herron run the 3-5 defense in the dome against Brookwood. And I thought, man, that is built around speed. That's something I can relate to. I played linebacker. There's 5 of those jokers on the field. So I made it a mission to learn the 3-5 defense. I went to Jeff Herron. I went to Rich Rodriguez. I went to Fisher DeBerry out at the Air Force, and I went to GMC. Coach GMC may be one of the longest tenured coaches in America, and he runs the 3-5 defense. So at the time, we broke it out in 04. We hadn't shown it, and Buford rolled into our place at 47 straight wins, 3 straight championships. And we ran the 3-5 against them and beat a good football team that was coached by Dexter Wood and Jess Simpson and some others. They had Justin Roper at quarterback, Jan Benag at tailback. They were really good, and we upset them that night. I'd like to think it was from the work and prep we did with that 3-5 defense.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember when you left MCA and went up there, and all the coaches were like, "What is he doing? He stayed down there and win forever. What's he going to Central Gwinnett for?" And then y'all pulled that upset, and everybody's like, never mind. he must know something that we don't know, and apparently it was the 3-5 defense.
Well, and the Central was the oldest school in the county, so it had potential to be built. I'll tell you something that was funny though. The first 2 years, everybody in Gwinnett has to have a coaches clinic, right, for your youth coaches. At least they did when I was there. My first 2 years there, we could do our coaches clinic in my coach's office. There were less than 10 coaches there wanting to hear what we had to say. When we beat Buford, they had to move it to the gym. I was like, I'm the same dude, man.
Yeah, you became a genius overnight.
I was a genius overnight. That's true. Still running about 5 plays, though.
So after Central Gwinnett, where did you roll to?
So Central had started changing a little bit. Central at that time, and may still be, was the only, this is not fair, I still don't like this, was the only school district in Gwinnett County who did not have a board member representing them. So whether it was on purpose, perception, or truth, the perception was we got neglected a lot of times. And I got tired of it. There was one year that I had built that little program up pretty good. My 9th grade played in the championship. My 10th grade played in the championship. And they rezoned us, and out of 50 freshmen, I had 17 report for camp. And I got really frustrated. And a friend of mine, Wesley Tankersley, was my secondary coach at the time. And he said, hey, my hometown job is opened up at Gilmer County. And he said, what do you think about that? And my wife and I had started having kids. And I thought, man, it'd be good to slow down a little bit to go into the mountains, get closer to my family. So we moved to LJ, and I was supposed to stay there 3 years, and I really wanted to. But the day job opened up, and I had told them that if it opened up, I was going to apply for it. Other than that, I would be a Bobcat. And it opened up, and I went there for 11 years. I think, Chris, I was there 08 through 2018.
Yeah, Wesley's down here, neighbor of mine now at Fitzgerald. He's 45 minutes away from us over here.
Yeah,
he made the move down south.
He gave me he came up and introduced himself to me in Atlanta. I don't remember if we were just watching ball games or coach's clinic, but he came up and said, my name is Wesley Tankers. I played DB at Chattanooga. I'd like to coach for you. So I was like, I kind of like that. And that spring I called him, and heck, we've been friends ever since.
Yeah, hired.
Hired.
Yeah. Back in the old days when you just go sit down and talk to somebody and you knew from the rip whether y'all were going to be able to coexist or not. And that's one thing that I miss about, the way we were raised and we came up was, you spent more time with each other. I don't know if it was because we had to trade film at a McDonald's or, our old heads like Coach Patterson and some of the other guys and Milton and them made us go to clinics and hang out and, forced you into getting to know one another. And that just seems like it's a little bit different these days.
Well, it is. And I think you touched on something that I've looked at quite immensely. You think about, like, last night, I was looking at our trips coverages. We struggled the other night against Charlton County in pass coverages. Played really well other than that. And I just thought, you know what? I'm going to look at some other trips coverages. And I was bored. I looked at them for about an hour online. When you and I were coming up, we had to call somebody or go sit in a clinic in Atlanta or Macon or Jacksonville, Florida, or Savannah or somewhere and find somebody that was speaking about the coverages. So the information at the tip of our fingers on the internet was not prevalent, but we didn't have it back then. So things were slower. We had to go build relationships with people and learn those systems.
Yeah, I remember when I was with Coach McAllister at Worth County and he wanted to put the split back veer in, and we went to Bacon County to sit down with Coach John Stevens, and he took the whole offensive staff, and I was a little poot head, young, first year, whatever, so I was just going to learn, and like he spent the whole day with us teaching us, how he ran that offense, and that was just something that, like you said, you couldn't Zoom call somebody or you couldn't look on YouTube. You had to actually go sit down and take notes and watch them draw it up on the overhead projector.
Steve Patterson informed me that I didn't have I got a week off of work. So I thought, he said, you're going to go learn how to coach offensive line in the option system. So I met with Steve Chafin, Steve Savage, and my last stop was with Coach Monken, who's the head coach at Army when he was at Georgia Southern. And I didn't think I realized meeting with Coach Monken, especially how little about option football I knew. That man was a genius with option football.
That's just awesome that we were exposed to things like that and got to be around a lot of the legends of the game, and you've carved out your niche, in the game especially. And I mean, it's borderline legend to me anyway. I don't really base legendary status on state championships, but man, you've won in places that they said they couldn't do it at McIntosh, and then you headed back to Dade after it came open at Gilmer and spent 11 years there. How was that?
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed being at Dade County. I helped Coach Poston, for example. He was a tile man, and I knew he wanted to be around ball. I helped him, guided him through his educational process, and he was on the staff. I knew one day he was going to be a head ball coach. The ceiling culturally at Dade in football is not very high. And I made a comment earlier about when you can build a team faster than you can build a culture. And sometimes at Dade, you would think that you got the culture flipped, and you wouldn't. and other times you would all of a sudden, do something nobody thought you could do. So it was really cool. I guess the biggest thing I've taken away from it, I was on a 10-win team as a player, and I coached the only 10-win team in school's history there, and that was pretty neat. But I could never maintain the winning stats we could build. So 07 we got our tail whipped. No, in 07, 08 we got our tail whipped. 09 we were an offsides illegal procedure away from beating Sonoris Perry at Chattooga and going to the playoffs. And then 2010, little Dade, we went to we upset Heard County, and then got beat by Lovett at home. We got to host a playoff game, the first time in the school's history. So those were big events, that were there. And then you turn around and have a 10-win season and go back to winning 4 ball games. So it was tough. So I actually came out of Dade with this is going to sound weird, but it is the truth. I came out of Dade with a losing record, but I was the most wins at the current Dade County High School of any coach in the school's history. So I didn't know how I felt about that. Got my tail whooped, but I had more wins than anybody else. So I still don't know how I feel about that, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being around my parents, around my friends I grew up with. I enjoyed giving back to a community that I had grown up in. So it was a good thing.
Yeah, David Thrower has always said you were one of the best mechanics that sometimes wasn't in the best shop, and there's a lot more good mechanics out there than there are good shops. So sometimes you just have to fight through it. And
I tell kids this in building, and guys that are out there that are building a program, I just never let a win or a loss define me as a person. I was going to go back, do the same thing that made me have success, made us successful. And occasionally you'll find out a kid or coach is like that philosophy. And I guess that keeps me going in my latter years.
So after your 11 years at Dade, you decided to go back to the coast. So you back down at McIntosh. What prompted that change of scenery?
My wife is from here.
Okay.
And so my son was going into the 8th grade, and we had a change that I didn't view as good at Dade. I knew it was going to be a long 2 or 3 years for somebody, and I didn't want my son to have to go through that. So I started looking, Chris, at other places, and I had started looking a couple of years before that, and I got a lot of second place medals. There were places that I could have gotten a job or got interviews at when my resume was hot, and when the resume was cold, those people wouldn't even interview you or bring you in for an interview. And so as it got time, probably one of the biggest testaments I can give when you have something you think is a godsend. I had been turned down for a few jobs and got frustrated with some things that went on policy-wise at Dade at the time. And I just prayed out loud. I was like, God, if you want me somewhere, show me. And about 5 minutes later, the phone rang. It was one of my former coaches, Dr. Chris Walski, who's the principal at Lincoln County now. He said, I'm the principal at McIntosh County Academy. Some of these guys that played for you, their sons are going through here. We've got a football opening, and we're who we want you. And so that was a really great feeling. And I felt like that was an answered prayer. So I haven't questioned it and been coaching my tail off and having fun, man.
Well, that's the key right there. And providing good experiences for the kids as well. I mean, that's something we've always done. Us older guys try to harp on to the young coaches is, it's not about us. It's not about you. It's about, the experiences and the life lessons that we can pass on to these young men that we're molding and shaping and treating them like we'd want somebody to treat our own youngin'.
That is exactly right. And I found that if that's how you coach, and that's what you do, if you're making decisions based on if that was your kid, most of the time you're going to be okay.
Yeah, I tell people that, quite often that I don't care about titles. I don't want to be a coordinator. I don't want to be a head coach. Just give me my little position and let me love on them kids. And as long as you do right by the kids, that's what I get stirred up the most about not doing right by the kids. And Going into the, changing the conversation a little bit into how things are now as opposed to when you got started. One of those things that I've been harping on is we talked about it off air, is the schedule. I don't think we're doing right by the kids playing those two scrimmage games and at least the first game of the season when it's wet bulb says you ain't supposed to be out there.
No, we're not. I've spent 8 years with the Georgia High School Association on the executive committee. And here are some of my observations, good or bad. There's a lot I felt like I did some good, and a lot of other good people have done some good there as well. Met some great people in the Georgia High School Association. But one thing that I noticed that happened more often than not was that we reinvented the wheel. We didn't study our past mistakes sometimes, and we would vote policies in that didn't work. And you'd be sitting there as a veteran coach, especially I saw Dave Hunter and Dexter Wood and some of those guys just kind of smile and they're like, this doesn't work. We've tried this before. You guys haven't studied what is going on in the state of Georgia. It might have been 5, 8, 10, 12 years old, but it hasn't worked. We've got to go, in a different route. And that is a little frustrating to see us make the same mistakes that we made, a decade ago. I wish that we would study the history just a little bit and to back that rabbit hole. But this rabbit hole, the point is that we haven't looked to see why we left starting in September like college does. We haven't looked at necessarily how hot it is at the time. We just said, okay, well, we're pushing a season 2 weeks one way or a season 2 weeks the other way. Well, man, we made it work when we were playing. So what if you played a little longer? If it was basketball, for example, is in the gym and the air conditioning. Football is brutal in August. So right now, this break in the weather that you and I were talking about before we got on air, this is football season now. That's what we were used to growing up. And I think at some point in time, we probably need to go back and revisit that and our starting times.
Well, what do you think about the push toward everybody going to the power ranking as the way we pick our playoff teams?
I used to be adamant 1 to 4 in the region, those 4 go. And I still believe that 1 to 3, 2s and 3s matched up are pretty good first round ball games. The odds on a 4 beating a 1 are not in your favor. Most of the time, those are slaughters. So I like the power ranking in a lot of ways. I don't think it's a perfect system, but I do think the matchups become a lot better. And I think if we paid attention to the process of the power rankings from several years ago, if we matched them up kind of geographically at first, where you didn't have, say, a Camden County traveling to Rome or something.
Yeah, Long County going to – where did they go last year? They went up to somewhere in northwest Georgia.
Yeah, it was something crazy. If we paid a little more attention to the geographical locations in those rankings, I think it could be something that's pretty good. And, you look at college football, not necessarily the Power 5, but your FCSs, your D2s, your AIs, they've been playing off rankings for years, putting people in brackets and putting better matchups on the field. So I am for it right now. I'm not going to tell you I don't see some pros and cons with it, but I'm definitely for it right now.
Well, what are some things about how you've approached, building different programs? You've been successful everywhere you've been. What are some things that have you changed over the years, or do you just stick with your system that works? I mean, what is your, like, if you're giving advice to a young guy taking over a place, what's, your top 3 things that you go in and try to establish immediately?
I think the first thing you've got to establish, especially earlier in my career and midpoint in my career, was the weight program. The weight program there's no compromise with that. You've got to lift. You've got to put the time in to the weight program to give yourself a chance to compete with the upper echelon. If you're not doing that, you're just not going to be able to do it. So the commitment in the weight room, teaching them why it's important is a big deal. And I guess the only change I've made in that area is I used to just be, this is for football. This is for football. you guys wouldn't understand it, but as I went along, I had wrestlers wanting to be hey, I want to be in the football period that list because y'all get after it. Then all of a sudden, I had a few girls. My daughter, for example, they wanted to be in the weight program. So our weight program is nicknamed Swole Time. And in the spring, winter months, January through May, we call that Swole Time. And if you get X amount of workouts, this year it was 40 workouts, you got the legendary Swole Time T-shirt. And this particular one says, "It's a buck thing."
That's
So
awesome.
that's the number one thing. And I didn't know this early in my career. I do now. So this would be a huge piece of advice as well, is to surround yourself with good people. If you can surround yourself with good people, you can eliminate a lot of problems, man. A whole lot of problems. I haven't been perfect at it. I've hired some bad apples, but I've also hired some lifelong friends, like I mentioned earlier, like Wesley Tankersley. I can go down a list of those guys that are on a prayer group when we need something. You know what I mean?
So what are some things about the game? I mean, you've been in it so long that's changed high school football in the state of Georgia specifically, that good, bad, or indifferent, that you've just noticed that you're like, man, this is a whole lot different than when I first got started.
I'll give you a couple that really stand out to me. You know, we have time now. There's only certain amount of time that you can hit during the week. So that 45 minutes, 135 minutes, whichever cycle you're on in the summer or actually in season in the fall, and you can't hit more than 2 days in a row. You know, you got a thud tempo and a full speed tempo, and can't wear knee pads. All that kind of stuff has regulated and toned the game down so the kids you can still play impact football, but you're not beating each other up so much through the week.
Coach, I had to teach mine how to cut block today. Like the old hold the dummy up and throw that opposite arm, that shoulder up, and get in that hip, opposite hip. And they looked at me like I was speaking Chinese.
Yeah, I promise you, mine. I got probably one or two that might know it right now, but there's some other ones that absolutely do not. And there are some things like that, a 4-point stance. Some of those are dying art.
Yeah, mine were like, we can do that. I said, as long as he's not engaged, baby, you go ahead, and if you're getting beat across your face, I would strongly encourage it.
Yeah, I'll tell you one that's really fascinated me recently. I had this phone call this year. Coach, would you mind talking us through how you teach quarterbacks take snap under center? And I thought, are you kidding me? So it was one of my former coaches, and I said, man, what's going on? I said, hey, you not know? He said, Brad, I've never had to coach anything but shotgun. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I just went through what I thought I take for granted. I had to go through the basics of it, like I was teaching a new center and a new quarterback.
Like, had to think about it. Like, all right, wait a minute, how would you teach this?
And I noticed one of my younger quarterbacks the other day, we fumbled in a ball game, and I just so happened I had videoed that play, not for that reason, but I had videoed that play to watch a kid run. We had a really talented freshman in the ball game, and I looked in the center. The quarterback's hands were not deep. It was like he's afraid to touch his tail end. And the center fired off the ball, and the quarterback backed up, hit him right in the tip of the finger, and jammed his finger, and the ball fell on the ground. The other team got the ball. And I thought, wow, this kid doesn't know how to take it. So we had to go, I call it snaps, arms, and hands right now on the practice schedule. So 5 minutes before offense starts, we're snapping to the quarterback under center and shotgun, and there's a receiver about 10 yards in front of the quarterback in center, and he is dropping back and popping him with a ball. That takes about 3 to 5 minutes, but we're working those snaps, man.
What's some other things about the game that's changed other than just the?
I think the big change is, you remember 2-a-days and 3-a-days and all that kind of stuff. That's no longer applicable, really.
Yeah, going to camp was like the best thing ever.
Yeah, you don't get that now. You get an OTA. And those type of things, you may go as an individual to an FCA camp or maybe a team 7-on-7, a little something like that. But that's been a big change to me. I know you probably want me to talk about the game itself, but this.
No, this is exactly what I was hoping for.
Just those things and like that. The last big camp that I remember going to overnight was going into the 2010 season. We went down to West Georgia. to the Southeastern Wing T camp that Jeff Herron and Jimmy Dorsey put on. And first period was coming out, and they said, would North Gwinnett report to field 1 for inside run? Ooh, that's a big dog. Would Peachtree Ridge report to field 1 for inside run? I said, oh, man, I wish I could watch that one. They just played for a state championship. It's going to be a barn burner. They said, would Dade County report to field 1 for inside run? No, we were picking kids up off the field, and that was probably the turning point in the Dade program was right there. So about a month later in football season, had this kid named Taylor Nye, and I saw on his phone when he would text me, had a little receipt down at the bottom, it said, let's see, SOVHC. It said SOVHC. Some of my players would text me and say SOVHC. So one day I asked Taylor, I said, what does SOVHC mean? I want to see it on your football text. He goes, you don't know, Coach? And I said, no. He said, Coach, that means survivor of hell camp. I thought, well, that camp made a lasting impression on those young men, but little did I know years later you wouldn't be able to do much like that.
Yeah, that's so awesome. So how's the season going this year? This will come out, and we're in week 4, and how things look for the Pirates this year? Buccaneers, I'm sorry.
Well, Buccaneers are Pirate, but you are correct. We graduated the most starters I've ever graduated. We graduated 8 off each side of the ball, so we graduated 16 starters. Now, the 3 I got on each side of the ball are pretty dang good ones. We've got a lot of young talent on the field with no experience. So I've always tried to hang my hat on defense, but right now we're scoring a lot of points. We scored 43 first game, 36 in the second game, and we're actually playing a pretty good run defense. We struggled with an identity in our coverages right now. We're still tweaking that as we speak. So we're 1-1 right now. We beat Islands in the opener, and then we lost to Charlton County in a really good ball game, 36-40. And so we were off this past week, and then we have a traditional powerhouse coming in, ECI. We're 3-3 against them the last 6 years, and they look really good right now. So we're going to have these young bucks going to have to grow up quick.
Well, if there's anybody that can get them there and get them to grow up fast, it's definitely you, Coach. You've done such a great job over the years, and one of the best ambassadors we've had in the game, one of the best humans I've ever met in the game. It's always a privilege and an honor to get to share a room with you when I see you at clinics or at all-star games, and I really do appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with everybody.
No problem, man. I enjoy talking about ball, and especially somebody like you. I don't mind talking on your show, man. It's great.
Well, thanks, Coach. I sure do appreciate it.
All right, man.